Joe, look at that wave.
This is what we do, Joe. The video stops and we're like, hi. Okay. All right. Hey, Seminole State family. Welcome back to another research rally. We are rallying the research today, and we are going to be talking about demystifying in-text citations. And if you haven't noticed yet, you see three very familiar faces. I hope they're familiar. And one unfamiliar face because we have a special guest with us today. Joe. Welcome to Joe. Give her a round of applause for Joe. All right. Yep, that's right. It's Nicole from the library doing the most, but also, I'm sorry, I got a new little tagline, you guys.
Okay, let's hear it.
Slimming like my bestie Paris H. Okay. If you know, you know. If you don't, then look it up. Google it. Yes. And we have Joe with us today, writing consultant from the Academic Success Center, one of our awesome partners on campus, right? Right?
Yes, absolutely.
Can I get a witness?
So the Academic Success Center is an awesome partnership with the library. I'm always sending students over to see the librarians when they're dealing with any research they have to do. And I know that y'all are sending them my way when it comes time to writing stuff. So we have a good partnership and a good working relationship. And I'm glad to be here today with y'all. Thanks so much.
And of course, we can't continue on without introducing
Ross. You're on mute, ski broski. And we can't. There you go. There it is.
Yes,
tell us that great
here,
joke again. What's the great punchline? What was it? You just.
Yeah. What was it? Did you have a
What
joke? Did you say something like profound or hilarious?
He's got to think about it. It was 8 seconds ago.
Let me think. I don't remember. I think I said hi.
There it is. That was it.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Information Jason here. We're all here. The crew's all here. Ross and Martin, 82. Got it. Awesome.
All right.
Oh, that might be an in-text citation reference. Oh, I see what you did there. I see what you did there. We're not going to talk about the lion in the background. All right. Over to you, Joe. Let's do the introduction and let's get going. What's an in-text citation? What are citations? Why do we use the Academic Writing Success Center? What do we? And there you go.
We're going to start out. We're going to jump right into a few of the basic core bedrock concepts that you would need to understand if you really want to wrap your brain around the what, when, why, and how of in-text citations. And we're going to start with plagiarism. All right. So in-text citations are one of the pieces in the network of aspects of writing a paper and putting it together that prevent you from accidentally or on purpose committing plagiarism, right? So can we get a really good solid definition of plagiarism?
Well, it depends on the kind of plagiarism that people do. So one version of plagiarism that I think is the most egregious is when folks are copying wholesale things that are not their own and passing it off as their own. Another is when perhaps you are taking another's work, you have a reference list, but you don't have an in-text citation. That is much more of a minor infraction and something that I don't think most instructors get really too upset about. Of course, we point that out to students. We say, hey, we need to see a citation here. We want the reader to understand where this is coming from, but there's different levels to it, right? So there's different kinds of crimes. There's felonies, there's misdemeanors, and there's traffic stops. And I think the same goes for plagiarism, right? So there's different levels and layers to this stuff.
Okay. And then another aspect of writing, a bedrock concept of writing your paper and really what's going on when you are writing a paper. Okay. You're creating a new piece of knowledge, right? You're getting facts and figures and information from different sources, and you're supposed to process it in your brain and come up and create some new knowledge, right? Now, in that process, you're having original thoughts in your paper, but also you have things you need to cite, which we are going to get further into. Now, Ross brought up an interesting point about scholarship as conversation, because not only are the in-text citations a way to not plagiarize technically, but the purpose of your paper goes beyond just not plagiarizing.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the reasons you're citing anything in general, in the first place, is to share your information, right? That's part of this whole research process. Is as you're synthesizing information and producing new knowledge, you're sharing your sources so that your audience can verify your claims, or they can investigate it deeper if they want to learn more. Your responsibility is to provide that information so that others can dig deeper. And when we look at it like academically speaking, right? Like the same thing happens when somebody does a research study. Well, then other people are going to read that research study and maybe apply it to their research. And that's how new information grows. But as students, we're all part of that same process. Every time we're producing a presentation, a paper, all of that stuff, we have that same responsibility to give our audience the material that to explore.
Right. All right, Jason, do we have some activity going on in the comments to see, do we have any fans? Ooh,
yes, Nicole, you do, Nicole. Everyone is watching you. Catherine is watching you, and Yesenia, everyone's watching you. No response yet on the lion. Nobody said anything about the lion, but
if you are watching and you have walked by the office and gotten scared by this lion and almost had a heart attack, please let us know in the comments. Okay, I'm sorry.
I'll let you know in the comments. I let you know.
Okay.
I'll let you know. And then I was going to jump back in on that conversation. We're talking in an academic level here at college. Clearly, plagiarizing something, taking somebody else's work and put it in your paper and claiming it as your own is a crystal clear violation of the academic honor code. But think about in real life, right? IRL, when are you always, who told you that? You hear any information. Where'd you hear that from? What news site did you hear that from? Who told you that? And then you're basing your retort on the credibility of who did tell you, right? If it was that person, it's like, oh, that must be legit. But if it's this person, it's like, oh, don't trust that. I'm not trusting them. So again, we're building on trust and accountability and reliability, but you want to make sure that you are using that information to reinforce your argument. And that information should come from a credible, reliable source, but you got to give them props. You have to say exactly where you got it from. And we'll talk more about that with the in-text citations.
Okay. So basically, I found when and I've been a librarian for several years. I've worked at previous institutions, and I worked really close with students at my last institution, like on a day-to-day basis at the reference desk. Like my office was the reference desk. And I found in explaining to students why they would have to use in-text citations. Oh, we're hiding Joe down here. We don't want that to happen. He's our special guest. I felt like breaking it down into a kind of a formula of where you would like classify literally any sentence in your paper helped contextualize it for a lot of students, and even for myself as I was trying to explain it in very basic terms. So what we used to tell students is when you write an assignment, every sentence in that, let's say a paper, falls into one of four categories. General knowledge, like something that is so well known that like you don't have to cite it, like the sky is blue. Something you were born knowing. Now we threw this one in there as kind of a joke because, hey, spoiler alert, you were born knowing nothing. Now there may be some things you think, I just know that. I just know this. Well, you know it because you got it from somewhere. You might forget exactly where you got it from, but if you want to put it in your paper, you are going to have to find a reference that you can put in your reference pages and in an in-text citation. Now, Ross, I know you had mentioned like you had experience with this with one of the programs here at Seminole.
Wait, say that again.
Like, remember you were saying you're working with the construction. A lot of the students in construction are they're so experienced.
Yeah, well, what Nicole and I were talking about the other day is, I work with a lot of these construction students, and one of the very core principles that they go through in the very first class is, why are we making all these choices, right? Like, you might have worked in the field and you might have put on 100 roofs, but like, why did you choose those shingles? And why did you do all that stuff, right? Like, that's part of the learning.
And they're like, that because that's what we do. And the teacher's like, okay, but why?
Yeah, that's often where people are approaching it from, is because when you've been doing the job for 10 years, you just do it because like that's what the blueprint says. But somebody had to figure it all out, like why you pitch the roof. It's just a good lesson in like, you might know how to do something, but you don't know why you're doing it. So like that, where we're going with that is like,
you have to find. You might not find the original place you knew it, but like, once again, if you want to cite it in your paper, put it in your paper, you have to find a source that can verify it. Also, original thoughts. Okay. Yes, you have those. And those are like those moments where, you're connecting the dots and like you've read your research and you are coming up with like new knowledge or something new to add to the scholarly conversation. Like basically your opinion that you would put in a paper, like okay, I read all this information. Now I'm like, you know what? It seems to me that here's my theory, your original thoughts. There should be some of those, a lot of those in every paper you do. Also, and then finally, reference to material, which is information like that we just explained, that me and Ross just explained, like, you know, information, facts, figures, information you're putting in there that you got from a source. Okay, so now we're moving closer into citing. So now we kind of have like a context. I don't know if like
how does that look, Joe? How does that look?
Jason,
deconstruct it. No, Joe's our guest.
Yeah, do you want to add?
That's good. You know, I think like with general knowledge, it is a case of everybody knows it already. So nobody's expecting a citation for something that we already know. Now that can be complicated sometimes if we start getting into who the audience is and if this audience knows it and so forth. I typically tell students to err on the side of citing, even in those contexts where, yes, my audience, the target audience I'm writing to here should know this thing, but it's not still a general audience knowledge kind of understanding. I would still say to cite it. And that's a good practice too, because in that community, you're showing the community where you're pulling stuff from anyways, right? So it's still kind of a good practice to do that, even if it's general knowledge that the community would already accept.
And right? These are things that the Academic Success Center tutors can help students with, right?
Yes. All of these things are things that we can help you to work on and work out within your paper and to give you some clues as to how to do it effectively. Yeah.
I'm so glad there's a tutor here, because how do you spell, like, if you're saying err on the side of citing?
Yeah, I was looking at that. Is it
another?
I think we need some more R's.
Can I get a tutor?
Well, that's That would be
Err. How do I spell that? If I'm like err on the side of caution. How has that ever put in the comments if your grandma, your mom, your dad, or your uncle?
Okay, so general. So we got the general knowledge. That's, you know, the sky is blue. This, that, and the other. We could probably come up with a game. And what would we declare as general knowledge?
So you don't need to cite that.
Okay. No. Okay. So what about your original thoughts? Let's do that one. How about your original thoughts, Joe? How would you cite yourself as your original thoughts? And then would that be an in-text? And then what would the full citation be?
So this, again, I mean, every answer I give is kind of like always based on context, because what you're doing, who you're writing to, who your audience is, and what your professor wants out of you are all important aspects of what you're doing, right? So I teach a research writing course over at UCF. And in that course, I have my students do an annotated bibliography. And so you may have heard that before. It's kind of a fancy, sounds like a really complicated assignment, but really it's just a list of the sources that you're going to use with summaries after each citation. It's a way to organize what you're doing. I have them also write an introduction to that annotated bibliography. And I tell them the annotated bibliography is just a tool to get us to another piece of writing that is going to be more of a public piece of communication that's designed for other audiences. So when they're using that annotated bibliography as a tool, they might pull something they used in the annotated bibliography and use it in the literature review later. And I have no recourse or no reason for them to cite that. Now, this is different though. If, for example, you wrote a paper 2 semesters ago in another class and you want to pull something from that and use it for this paper, then you absolutely should cite where you're pulling it from, right? So context matters a lot in the way that, like, there's nuances to these things, right? It's not always like clear cut, right? And so sometimes we have to really think about those nuanced factors.
Now, in the average paper, when you put in your original thoughts, like the things you came up with in your head after doing your research and like really mulling it around and simmering it around, and knocking it around off of stuff that you already know, okay, because that's part of that process of coming to your original thoughts. You don't have to cite yourself with either a reference, like literally in your reference list, or an in-text citation, only if, and if only, you are actually literally citing something from a paper that you wrote in a previous assignment. But oftentimes we will warn students against doing that, because then we get into other gray areas of possible plagiarism or...
Yes.
Okay, explain, Joe.
So one of the things that most instructors want is they want the work to be original when you're doing a new course. And so in my syllabus, I express that I want your work to be original for this class, and I don't want you to use work that you previously did for other classes. And so the reason for this is that I have certain learning objectives and outcomes that I want students to reach. And if we're just rehashing something we did before, we're not meeting that academic requirement that I'm asking for, right? So that's the main reason for me doing it. And other professors may have different reasons for this too, right? So there could be a range of other reasons why professors would not want you using those other thoughts from your original assignments. Yeah.
And you also, on that note, you probably want to stay clear of upcycling or recycling all of your same assignments, right? You have to do a George Washington paper on this one, and then the George Washington paper, that's the same paper, the George Washington again. It's like, well, that you're kind of plagiarizing. No, that's going to be a gray area.
Because, you know,
yeah.
If that happens,
if you have a question about the citation, when in doubt, try to find a citation, talk to a librarian, talk to a writing tutor before you turn it in. Don't just go, whatever, I'm good because I'm whatever.
Because that's a big giant.
And that is a vegan burger because we have 3 vegans on the call here. We got Joe, Ross, and Jason. So that is a vegan. That is a vegan burger. Okay.
No one in the email chain when we were preparing, and they're like, "Oh, Joe Longhaney is coming," and I'm like, "Is that the vegan bodybuilder professor?" I was like, "That name is so familiar." So yeah,
something she never says about Ross or I.
Bodybuilders, though? And I just happen to know that factoid.
Yeah, my bodybuilding days are over.
Okay, so by and large, most of the material that you need to worry about citing or that you are going to be citing in your paper is referenced material. And that's from your articles, ebooks, web articles, websites, etc. And when you are like using that material in your paper, you're either paraphrasing or using direct quotes. Okay. Right, Joe? Or
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So what I encourage my students is to have a mix. And so this will vary from one instructor to another. So I always say err on the side of what your instructor tells you to do. But for me, I don't want there to be an overabundance of direct quotes, because then I tell my students, look, it's not your voice. You don't have a voice if that happens, right? Where's your voice in this? So I think a mix of paraphrases and quotes is a good way to go, and having balance, right? Having a bit of a balance between paraphrases and quotes is usually a good approach for writing papers. And again, it comes down to context. It depends what you're trying to do, and it depends on the situation you're writing for. Some situations may call for more direct quotes. Some situations may call for fewer. But I think a good rule of thumb is to keep it balanced. Allow your own voice to come through by paraphrasing, putting the words of somebody else, or putting the quote into your own words so that you're driving the text forward. Most writing instructors want to see and hear the voice of the student as the dominant force in the paper. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, if you're over quoting, I never get to read your voice as a student, right? And paraphrasing is also a really important practice that will benefit us as we go forward, right? In many, many contexts and situations, the ability to articulate something back in a way that makes sense for us and can make sense for audiences we're trying to reach. And so that's a skill set that is a practice that you just have to engage with and engage with and engage with again. I had a teacher in graduate school who had us take these 10 quotes and rewrite them 10 times, paraphrasing the same idea, keeping the same idea, but using a different approach to how we contextualize the sentence, right? Building emphasis here, changing emphasis there, right? All of these things. And at the time I was like, oh God, this is miserable. Oh my God, I hate this assignment. This thing sucks. But it gave me dexterity, right? The ability to then control my sentences and control ideas. And so that's the importance and why your professors are asking you to do a mix of these things, right? So I hope that helps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And make sure too, like on going back to the general knowledge, try not to be like William Shakespeare said, just something that has nothing to do with anything. Don't get the assignment and go, I need a quote, and pull some text and go, there's my quote, if it has nothing to do with your argument or your point of view. I've seen that come through across too. Well, here's my quote, and it's like the first sentence of the thing, and it's like, the dog ran across the street. Well, that has nothing to do with your argument. You don't need to just pull that. I know you're stressed out. I know you don't fully understand the assignment, but we'll work through it. But make sure that you're taking something that reinforces your point of view, which Joe was saying. The professors want to hear from you. We want to hear your unique point of view. And if you take a little salt and pepper here from other things, make sure that it's helping reinforce your argument, right?
And springboarding off of what you both said, I set my mind to, like, from a librarian's point of view, look, you can't do any of these things properly unless you've like done good research that points to the information you need to know that's applicable to your assignment, and you've actually read it.
Yeah, read it. Correct.
If you don't know, if you haven't read it enough to be able to talk about it, and basically paraphrasing is like, could you tell me out loud? Could you say out loud to me that knows nothing about the topic what this information said? If you can rephrase it or paraphrase it in your own words, then you know it. You can't paraphrase unless you've actually read the material. I mean, you could kind of like stumble through it and maybe like come up with something, but like then you'd be on that ChatGPT level. Future episode coming soon.
And by the way, so in the chat, speaking of chat, we have everybody, we put the call out, what's everyone into, and everyone's pretty familiar with MLA. Ellie, Eli, is it Ellie or Eli?
MLA.
Euthenia, Jetsari, Grace. Okay, so then let's go back to Ross's. I believe Ross had an example of an MLA in-text citation, which I think we're talking about today. So let's get into it. What would an in-text citation be? Do I just write in-text citation? Where does it go? Why is it in the sentence? I'm asking all these questions. Clearly, I think I know, but I want someone else to answer these questions.
And before we get to the example where I think that's we'll be able to show that. I did have this. Okay, what is the difference between I don't know if we've already kind of covered this. Maybe we kind of have, but just making sure everyone knows references and in-text citations are two separate things.
And they talk to each other.
Yes.
I like to say one points down. One's an appetizer. The in-text citation points down to the main course. Have you used that one before, Joe? That's trademarked. Jason Anfinson.
I haven't, because I know it's trademarked and I didn't use it. I didn't know
Ah, very good.
Because he will sue you. He will sue you.
I work with the
instantly.
legal studies program here, so I know when not to use trademark.
I trademarked that.
Jason.
There we go. Okay, so what are we doing? There we go.
Okay, so most people said they know MLA, and this example that I already had prepared multiple years ago that I didn't take the time to redo in MLA is APA, but they're like pretty close. I mean, once again, like today we've done a deep dive ultra niche into like the bedrock concepts of understanding like what and why and how like for in-text citations. So today we're not doing like a whole workshop on like, oh, literally let us show you how to do every single kind of in-text citation. We don't have time for that. Okay, ain't nobody got time for that right now. Now Joe works at the Academic Success Center, and him among the other tutors can help you if you make an appointment, go to their website, check it out. Okay, because once again, Joe, I hear you keep saying it's a very contextual. So there's no way that we could like illustrate all the examples that apply to all the context of anybody watching right now that's finishing assignments, right?
And every citation style has a reason for being the way that it is. And when I was a student, I always thought, oh, it's just to annoy me, right? That's why it is there, because it just sucks. But there's a reason for the madness, right? So you got APA on the screen right now. We all see APA. If we look down at the reference list, the second item we see is the year of publication, right? So the year of publication comes second. In APA, the year matters a lot because psychologists, the research that's happening is really important that we know when it happened. Because if something is happening in 2022 versus 2014, a lot has changed in psychology over the course of those 8 years, right? So that's why these are different, right? So it's not that each discipline chooses a reference style and says, oh, you know what, we're going to screw those people over. No, they're all working towards the goals of their discipline, right? You'll also notice another thing about APA. There's just an initial for the author, P. Burns. Pitch this question out. Why do you think APA decides to not include the full name? of the individual?
That's a good question, and I have 179 years of graduate school doing APA, and I've never been actually told that, so I'd love to hear the answer. And that was an accurate number.
The answer is we do not want people to discriminate based on names and gender and ethnicity and so forth. So APA in its wisdom said, we don't want people to think differently whether this was Paul Burns or Paula Burns who wrote this piece about gender concept that we're dealing with, right? So those are some of the things that you will notice, the nuances of citation and referencing. That are there. And I find that when I understand why something is crazy the way that it is, I'm able to understand how to do it better, right? So that's why I kind of like emphasize those elements of the why part.
And on that note, Joe, you had said that you liken, you got a good analogy for what a like an in-text citation is like if you want to compare it to something else that people are familiar with.
Yeah, it's like a hyperlink, right? So if we are familiar, anytime we're reading on like blogs and stuff, we'll get a hyperlink, they'll take us to something else. And a citation is very similar to a hyperlink. And so this is like the precursor to hyperlinks. Before we had hyperlinks, this is what we had to be able to track down sources. So I'm reading along and the beginning of the piece, and I read this really interesting sentence, this idea. I'm like, oh my God, I need to learn more about that. Well, bam, I have the author's last name and I have the page number, right, where that thing is. And I can scroll to the bottom and the references are alphabetized so I can easily find the author, and then I can go look up that source because now I have the publication information. I can go to the library and I can find it. And if I'm having trouble, I can do a chat with a librarian. And Nicole, Jason, or Ross will come to my aid and show me how to find that source.
That was an amazing, that was a great shout out. Thank you so much. I don't have a video for thanks for the shout out. Okay. I don't. Here, how about this? It's That's what my brain did when you just said that.
What was that one?
It was a home run.
Oh man.
Wait, I thought that was tennis.
Is there a home run in
tennis?
Thank you for that commercial break. Okay, so we set it up. Now let's go into a little bit into this paragraph and kind of illustrate some of the things that we've been talking about.
And this is APA, but a lot of people in the chat had MLA. So I don't know if we want to switch gears really quick and find a location article because everyone wants to do the MLA and nobody likes APA and nobody gives a rip about Chicago. Okay, nobody wants Chicago. And by the way, there's millions of styles. Maybe not that much, but there's a lot. Turabian, there's a lot of different styles. So when you're picking the citation generator on the library databases, don't just pick the very first one because if you're in MLA, my suggestion, that's probably going to be APA. It's going to go in order and you're probably going to grab the wrong one. So anyway.
Yeah. So depending on what information you use in the sentence, like, okay, so this first one, this reference, like Ross said, the in-text citation speaks to the reference. So if I find a sentence that's interesting, like Joe mentioned, and I want to know more about it, which reference did this sentence come from? I look at the in-text citation. This particular reference doesn't have an author. Sometimes that happens, especially with websites or web articles. So I can say APA die, please, 2014. Where is it? Oh, yes, that's down here on my references list. And that's how I'd find it. Okay. Now, the second reference does have an author, and the second sentence pulls out a factoid. Okay. It's referencing a fact from that source. And the author's name is actually put into the sentence. It's worked into the sentence. So that in-text citation, you don't actually have to have the author's last name in there. Now, the following sentence is from that same reference, and it doesn't mention the author's name. So here you can see, in order to directly or to specifically direct the reader to that exact reference, make it clear, okay, Burns, 2017, that leads you to this citation. This in-text citation doesn't need the last name because the last name is in the sentence. But once again, after reading the sentence, it would lead you back to that specific reference that is connected to the in-text citation. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So and you can do it both ways in the paper, right? So what one is called an integral citation, the other is called a non-integral citation. And so the non-integral citation is when we have the author's name and the year in the citation, right, at the end.
Mm-hmm.
The integral citation is when we introduce the author in the sentence, right? We might say, according to Smith. And then if we're in APA, we would write the year after that, right? According to Smith, 2020, blah, 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 right? And then if we have Smith 2020 already there in the sentence, we don't need to put it again in another citation, right? There's, we don't use citations for redundancy purposes. The reason we use a shortened version in a citation is it takes away from readability to put all that gobbledygook from the reference in the middle of the text. How crummy would that be to read? It'd be like, oh my God, I don't want to read that. There's just so much there. So that's why we use a shortened version, right? Just the author's last name.
And there's different lead-ins, Joe. I mean, you can use a mix and match, especially, I'm more familiar with APA, but you don't want to just keep saying, according to Ross, according to Joe,
right.
according to everybody, according to Grandma. That starts to, and that waters down you can even hear me saying it. It's like, quit saying according to, and I'm pretty sure the grading professor.
Hey, quit saying according to.
Hey, quit saying according to. I'm pretty sure the grading professor is saying the same thing when they're reading the paper. No lie, right? Because you're one of 25 in a whole class and they have 7 classes or whatever. So just keep that in mind. According to this, or Ross said, right, or whatever. But Ross, in yours, don't you have? Isn't that a MLA citation?
Yeah, MLA does it slightly differently, where they use the what am I trying to say?
That's correct, Ross. That's you, Joe.
MLA uses the page numbers in there with the names too. So that's what is important in this citation. Because if I'm using a direct quote or something, like, I need to go find it exactly in that text.
Okay. And then even here in this one, this example, and this is another reason why you have to go, like, today we can't cover everything. When you're doing your assignment, you have to go to a reputable guide for MLA or APA or whatever citation style, and then also get help from librarians and or tutors, and both. Use us both to find out, like, all the nuances. Like para 3, this is because this source is actually a website. It's not an article, it's not a book. So that's what's used for APA to, like, indicate if you have a direct quote. Okay, and direct quote has the literal quotation marks around it. Okay, just to be clear. So people could find the exact spot. And I only put para 3 because in the sentence, I mixed it up here and literally put the name of the source in the sentence as a way to, like Jason was saying, like don't use according to, mixed up your different styles, and that'll affect your in-text citations. And then of course, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was just going to flip it over. Let's just take a look at the Academic Success Center so we can do some promotion here. So Joe, do you want to give us a little bit of a spiel here? We have the website. I'll put that in the link as well, and the address here and the doo-doo-doo.
Yeah, so we have experts in all different types of disciplines that can work with you on any projects across any of the courses you're taking. So whether you're working in math, whether you're working in some sciences, whether you're working in writing, we have somebody that can work with you and give you a hand with anything you may be struggling with. But I want to emphasize, this is not just about when you're struggling, right? This is a time where you can go and meet with people. We have study rooms. And also it's good to just work with somebody, even if you're not struggling, if you just want to be great at something, right? Collaboration is really important for, building your skill set. When I was in grad school, a big part of getting better was I met with people and did study groups, right? I was constantly engaging with people with the writing I was doing and having audiences read this stuff. So, I think just coming in here and seeing what we have to offer is really great. We have online services too, so you can do online tutoring, and you can sign up for that. That's going to be in the evenings. We typically have online tutoring available across many disciplines, and again, so anything from accounting all the way to zoology, right? So anything that you might be taking, we have some tutors that can give you a hand with anything you're working on.
Sounds good. Thank you. I think this has been. Have we reached maximum capacity? We have 85,000 viewers. That's our second largest ever.
Oh, Wait,
do you see the same number?
Are those your new glasses, Jason? Because I think something's wrong. I think you're seeing it wrong there.
8. Okay, 8 viewers, and we have a lot of students in there. So go ahead. I'm going to put in the chat. I'll put the text number. If you did not RSVP and you need your credit, give us a text. We'll get that going here. And then I have the few who've already RSVP'd through Raider Connect, so you all should be good to go. There is the text. Rock and roll. Joe Longhanny, vegans, 3 vegans and one non-vegan on the call, but there's a lion in the shot, so it looks like it all works out. So
one more shout out: like, share, subscribe. Okay, we're here doing this thing. We're helping you out. We're connecting you with resources that will help you as a student. If you are Seminole State family across the world, love you, love you, love you. Look, we take international students, so transfer here, move to Florida, come to Seminole State.
Sliving!
Okay?
We're sliving. Bye, Joe. Thank you very much. This is a great edition. See you. Bye.
Have me back on the show sometime. You know?
What?
The freeze frame. I did the freeze frame and it didn't work. All right, everyone, freeze frame.
I'm trying to
that's the end of the show.
Video.
That's the end.